I'm really protective of my actors, you know? Like, they're all really good people. I was pissed that they were coming after one of my actors. The trolls really can eat a bag of dicks and fuck off to the sun. I reiterate that comment.
Eric Kripke, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, it's good seeing you, Kate.
Going into season 4 of The Boys.
Show me a little wrath.
What did you see as the season's overall themes, and where did you want the story to go?
One big theme is this election. It's kind of where the season storyline was heading based on season 3. We have like this hidden homicidal superhero, a heartbeat from the White House.
That's right.
As you do.
By the way, had there not been the dual strikes, would this season have come earlier?
Just a couple months.
Okay.
You know, we thought maybe we would land maybe like end of 23, top of 24. Mm-hmm. So we always knew it was gonna be around the election.
Butcher and Homelander have always existed in parallel. Where do we find them in season 4?
They're both dealing with their mortality. Butcher, that's continuing a storyline. He has 6 months to live, and so we got really interested in like, okay, what does he want to do with the time he has left? And then we always like paralleling the arcs and having them be two sides of the same coin. So we gave Homelander a gray pubic hair, which is like the worst thing you could do to that guy. I think he's just so indignant by the fact that he ages, not unlike probably a lot of Hollywood stars.
Are there any instances where you have changed the characters as you've seen what the actors can do? I'm thinking specifically of Anthony Starr, just because he can go from terrifying to funny so quickly.
The short answer is all of them. One of the things I love most about television is your ability to evolve and adjust as dailies come in. And you can like tailor the role. Like once you see what the actor is comfortable with and what they excel at and where some of their blind spots are, you can really start playing to their strengths. In Homelander's example, you know, Ant's ability to give like 16 facial expressions when another person gives one is just so astounding. Like, give that guy an Emmy already. Like, I don't understand why it hasn't happened yet.
I wanted to ask about the evolution of A-Train.
We gave him a bit of a redemption arc this season for a couple reasons. One is we were sort of set up for it last season because his storyline last season was he was pretending to give a shit so much that he actually accidentally started to give a shit. But also, like, one of the big themes of the season is forgiveness. And we wanted to bring Huey to a point, like definitely the healthy, humanistic path would be for him to let go of his rage and forgive the person, not for them, but for him. You know, and that's something Butcher is completely unable to do.
How did the set change with Butcher not in charge of the boys and Karl Urban having more scenes, you know, with other people or by himself? Like, was that different?
Yeah, it actually was. I think it was, I mean, I think it was challenging for all of them because there's a million ways that I'm lucky in this show. One of them is that the cast genuinely loves each other, and not even like genuinely, but it's bullshit, like genuinely loves each other, and they stay on set. It's wild. You know, they go right up, they don't go back to their trailers because they like hanging out on set, and they all play backgammon, and they all have these like special chairs, each one of them made that's like specific to their character, and it's just, I've never seen anything like it. But this season, Karl had reasonably few scenes with that group. Right. I think he felt like a little FOMO because like the group was all together and he was kind of out in the cold, which, you know, does mirror what was going on with his character.
Right. Can you talk about casting Cameron Crovetti in what was once a very small role?
He's my dad.
Right, he murdered some poor sod right in front of your eyes.
That guy was a pedophile.
Right, it ain't true. He's lying to you.
I assume it's a crapshoot when you cast a child actor.
Yeah, I mean, casting kids is obviously super, super hard, and Cameron was just so good. He just kept crushing it over and could break your heart that, you know, we all looked at each other and were like, we'd be crazy not to write more for him. What was always sort of meant to be a supporting character, like, evolved into really being like one of the main characters. But we certainly wouldn't have leaned into it if Cameron wasn't as good as he was.
And you introduced the character of Kessler.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how you changed that role for the show?
I mean, the truth is Jeffrey Dean is probably only Kessler in name only. Like, in the comic, he's this like simpering, weak person for Butcher to basically just beat up on. The character we had talked about was every person in Butcher's life seems to try to hold him back. Everyone's just like, no, you're going too far, you're insane, don't go that far. And we said, well, he should be friends with someone who, instead of holding him back, is actively pushing him forward.
We need someone like you, Billy, before the supes start rounding us up and dumping us off in camps.
If Butcher found himself with someone who was as bad as Butcher, that's a really dangerous combination. But then you need to find someone as charismatic to basically be another Carl, and that doesn't grow on trees. And luckily, that was when Jeffrey and I were talking about him doing a part, and you know, those two can really go toe to toe.
Introducing brand new supes to the Seven, Sister Sage and Firecracker.
Look, what's important is, what are you selling?
I'm here to share the truth. Nothing but.
What are you selling?
Did I stutter?
How did you create those specific characters?
Sage came out of the conversation of, you know, one weakness that Homelander really has is he's generally surrounded by idiots.
Yeah.
And so if we gave him someone truly brilliant, that makes him much more formidable. It turns out that that's a really hard character to write. Like, it's really hard to write the smartest person in the world, because you have to write things that the smartest person in the world would think of, and we're not the smartest people in the world, so that's really difficult. You know, and then Sage became like a really interesting character because, you know, someone came up with the notion of like, well, let's make her an African-American woman who nobody listens to. And so here she is, the ability to save all of mankind,
Right.
and everyone just kind of thinks she's invisible, which, you know, I thought was a super interesting social commentary on top of that character. And then Susan, you know, brings it to life and is just so smart. Firecracker came from like, hey, isn't Marjorie Taylor Greene scary? And it's just like that type of personality that's sort of like, you had Trump, but now you have these like Trump spawn that are trying to outdo each other for how outrageous and sexualized and gun-toting and slavishly obedient they can be. And just that idea of starting to, like, it wouldn't just start and end with Homelander. He would start to create these spores
Right.
that would grow into these other characters, and
Right.
she's a version of that.
And as you said, The Boys has become increasingly political. At what point did you realize that that was an intrinsic part of the show?
Very early. When we first pitched the show, it was before Trump was elected. And the idea that a celebrity would actively want to turn themselves into a fascist autocrat was kind of a crazy idea. I mean, it still is, but it turned out to have happened. But we sort of lucked into whose metaphor is really about the moment we're living in, which is the cross-section of celebrity and authoritarianism. And so, like, once we realized that, we're like, well, we have to go all the way. And so every season we've just pushed it a little bit further. But it's all over. I mean, it's all over season one. You know, he's giving very George Bush speeches. He's, you know, being praised by throngs of devout followers. I mean, it's there from the beginning.
Right. I mean, do you ever worry about being too political? I mean, Liberty was a literal Nazi in season 2, or is it just something you lean into?
I'm just going to lean into it, and then the audience can sort of decide whether they want to watch or not. I mean, it's like it's almost become South Park. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, there's just so few shows that can directly comment on the world we're living in, and they get to do it as a cartoon. We get to hold up a mirror as a fantasy genre show. I mean, it's all in the original comic. The comic is really political. Totally. It's political about like the post 9/11 George Bush era.
The Boys is a show that examines and very much damns toxic masculinity. There's a theory of the bad fan, people who just root for villains just because they like what the bad things that they do. Yeah. Do you ever think about the Boys fandom and wonder about the ratio of bad fans? I have to believe that the quote-unquote bad fans are a very small minority, because I don't know how you root for Homelander. You know, when the guy is like slurping up breast milk and being like the weakest character in the show over and over and over again, and being like, he's not even particularly macho. He's weird. He's weird and thin-skinned.
I'm stronger. I'm smarter. I'm better. I am better!
I don't know how you look at that guy and you're like, that's my guy. But I think it's a minority. The show's not subtle. It wears its politics on its sleeve. And it's funny to rip on, the madness on the right. And, and we get some shots in on the left of like all the performative wokeness and everything. So I'm hoping that that's the vast majority. When Erin Moriarty spoke out last year about being attacked by some of the fandom, you tweeted, I'm going to quote it, "Hi trolls, 1, this is literally the opposite of the show's fucking message. 2, you're causing pain to real people with real feelings. Be kind. If you can't be kind, then eat a bag of dicks, fuck off to the sun, and don't watch The Boys. We don't want you." Yeah, that is a thing that I said. Incredible. What made you do that, and how was it received? First question, why I did it is, I'm really protective of my actors, like they're all really good people, and you start to feel like their dad, in a way, and like she was genuinely hurt and like really upset, and I just felt like, fuck them. Like I was genuinely angry. I can't say I put a lot of careful thought into it. It's perfect. I just was like, I was pissed that they were coming after one of my actors. And I actually, the response was strangely positive. Like, I think there was just a lot of people that watched that stuff from afar and it's just like, that's bullshit. Yes. Like, I get that person is in the public eye and you're allowed to say, I like that performance. I don't like that performance. I like that show. I don't like that show. That actor works for me. They don't work for me. Obviously, we all do. But like when it starts to become like these personal attacks on who they are, and like when fucking Megyn Kelly wants to talk about it, it's really not fair because they're not in a position that they can fight back. Yeah. So yeah, the trolls really can eat a bag of dicks and fuck off to the sun. I reiterate that comment. The point of view of The Boys comic is pretty geared toward the male characters. And from the very beginning, the women on The Boys have been really full, in-depth characters. Was that something you came into the series saying, we're going to do this? Very much so. I mean, the comic is, as you say, like very, very like male-oriented, and I mean, part of it just comes from the practical considerations of like, hey, I want a really big tent, and I don't want to do some edgelord thing where, I don't want to make like edgelord material for incels or whatever, like I want something for everybody. And so I was like, we really need to muscle up the female characters. It worked, and it gave us a fresher perspective to see what a woman's point of view in this world is, this sort of like toxic macho world. So then we just kept doing more of it. Also, like the pilot begins with a sexual assault. That's and it's handled a little glibly in the comic, and we always said, well, if we're gonna handle it, we have to really be responsible and dive into it. Do you have any plans for a true crossover
between The Boys and Gen V?
I like the idea that there's like strands and Easter eggs that kind of pop back and forth, but like full team up, no. I live in total fear of this notion that like you have to watch both of them to understand the other one. And so to me, it's like, if you want to watch The Boys, you don't want to watch this other show, don't watch it. If you want to watch Gen V and don't watch The Boys, which I actually know a lot of people that do that, great. You know, like they're each their own story. They each have their own reason for being. They each need to be good enough to exist without the other one existing. But I'm not giving the audience homework.
You've started filming season 2 of Gen V.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's you know, it's no secret that we were dealt, you know, quite a blow, and we lost one of our leading actors tragically to a motorcycle accident, Chance Perdomo. And so it's been really been emotional and difficult. I think it's hard for the actors. I mean, they're a real family, and you know, we had to rethink and rewrite everything in like a really short period of time to make sure we were honoring him, which is challenging, but it's pales in comparison to what his family and friends are going through. So,
Of course. Yeah. I'm so sorry.
no,
that
thanks,
happened.
thanks.
From the beginning of The Boys, the show really has deviated from the comics. Did you go in saying, this is going to be very different?
For sure. The comic itself is really episodic. Like I always used to say, it would really work in a rated X CBS. Like it, you know, because it basically works as a procedural where like every 2 or 3 issues is its own story, and then they move on, and there isn't like an incredible amount of building. And you know, look, the necessity of streaming, especially at that time, was I needed a story that could support 8 hours, and the books simply didn't have that. So I knew from the very jump, my attack was, I said to Garth Ennis, I want to get the characters right and I want to get the tone right, but are you okay if the story isn't the same? And he was great. He like totally got it. It's funny, what he always says to me is like, just get Butcher right. You know, Butcher is a character that he really feels personally strong about, and almost invariably his notes are about Butcher and Butcher's dialogue, which is great because you know he's from Ireland and has much more of an ear for what someone from East London would sound like than I do.
They got all the money and all the power, and they want us dead. We're outmanned and outgunned, and we've got to put them cunts in a box before they do it to us.
People who've read the comics know how the story of the comics ends, which strikes me as not the right ending for the show you've made. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that?
Yeah, there's some stuff in the comic that we couldn't do even if we wanted to. You know, I think, look, there's some shocking twists in the comic, but I would want them to be like just a little more emotionally satisfying, you know, and so, you know, the ending I have in mind is certainly has elements that it's inspired by that, you know, but it's not the ending from the comics.
We're winding down here, but we can do some more rapid fire things.
Oh, cool. Speed ramp.
So will it be a 2-year goddamn break between seasons, or what do you think?
Look, I'm writing as fast as I can.
All right, okay. What's happening with The Boys Mexico?
The deal for the writer is just closing, and then he's going to start writing the pilot.
What's your favorite episode ever of The Boys? Like the one where you were like, this is it, this is the show?
That'd be like asking who my favorite kids are.
You probably have one.
Yeah, you name your favorite child, and I'll name my favorite episode of The Boys. No, but there's things that I love. The one that was the first one that I was like, oh, I get what this show is season 1, episode 4 of the plane hijacking.
No!
Just these two!
No, what? So they can tell the world that we left the rest of them to fucking die?
Come on!
Stay back! You stay the fuck back! I'll laser every fucking one of you!
Yes.
You know, that was when like, oh, I get it. I get it now. And so I'll say that one, but really all of them.
What's an example of something that you saw and you were like, this is really working, let's write more toward that?
Well, I'll tell you one, Frenchie and Kimiko. You know, that was one where, like, they have this very sweet relationship in the comics, and so we knew we wanted to do that, but, like, the chemistry between those two is, like, so off the charts that we just kept writing it, and all credit to Karen Fukuhara, who is delivering like a great performance without having said a single line of dialogue. Like what a high wire act of a performance.
Absolutely.
And you always understand where she is and where she's coming from, and she brings you into her experience. And so I would say, yeah, Frenchie and Kimiko is probably the best answer in that.
The Black Noir character is very different and interesting in the comics. Was that ever a storyline that you were interested in at all?
No, and I don't mind saying it. In the comics, he's a clone of Homelander this entire time, and is actually the one doing all these horrific things. And again, it's a hell of a twist, but it's like, well, wait, the villain I've been following isn't really the villain, and that, you know, mileage varies, and I'm sure fans are mad I'm not going that way, but that felt not as satisfying to me, you know, as I'm like, if I'm going to follow this villain, I want this guy to be the villain. So I was never really into the clone idea. Plus, cloning feels like too, I'm going to sound silly, but cloning feels too magical for the show. You know, we try to say that like superheroes are the only slippery banana, and then everything else we try to make as grounded as possible.
Jim Beaver has been in The Boys since season 1. Jensen Ackles was and is Soldier Boy. Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Rob Benedict joined this season. You've told my colleague Jenny Moss that you're hoping to write Jared Padalecki in for next season, even for a bit part.
Yes.
How have you decided to seed in the supernatural actors' appearances?
You know, the reason I want the actors, outside of the kickback they give me, you know, 20%
Of course,
of every role. It's a really simple answer, which is like, I just like working with people that I know and I like, you know, and I just happen to like a lot of people from that cast and keep in touch with all of them, and we're all still a big family, and you know, it just makes your life easier when someone is coming to set and you know they're good and you know they'll get along with everyone else. And then in terms of like Easter eggs, like part of it is also, you know, my producing director is Phil Segrisha, who is one of our most prolific directors of Supernatural, Chris Lennertz, who did the music. Like, we're all kind of there, you know, and so behind the scenes as well as the actors in front. And so you know, Phil will say like, hey, let's do a trunk shot. I'm like, cool, we'll make some reference to the supernatural trunk, or, you know, or he wants to put an Impala in an online, you know, little cartoon or something. And so it's just honestly like so much of this job is just amusing ourselves. Probably a frightening amount. I think people would be surprised to know how much of this job is just like, well, I don't know, it makes me laugh, and then we just do it.
You've created this whole world, and it's an expanding universe. How much are you thinking about where it's all going and when it will end? I
don't know the answer to when it will end. Look, it's like, it's a little intimidating to me. I'm, as I mentioned before, like, I'm really scared of turning into the thing that we're parodying. So it's just really important to make those stories matter and give them all their own reason for being, and that they don't feel like cash grabs, you know, like they feel like, oh, there's people who are passionate about telling these stories, and that's what we're trying to do. And, you know, it takes a village of really brilliant people. Michelle Fazekas, who's running Gen V, does an incredible job. But I hope that we keep our quality up, you know, or not do it, you know, and I hope we're more selective and we keep the quality going, because I don't, you know, again, it'd be a huge bummer if of all shows, like, this is the show that sells out. So I'm fighting that really hard.
Eric, thank you so much. This was
Thanks, Kate.
wonderful.
Yeah, it was really fun. Thanks.